Welcome back, folks. It's 30 minutes past 6 o'clock. It is a fantastic Friday morning in Port of Spain. Well, Transport Minister Mr. Rohan Sinanan sought to reassure the people of Tobago that all is well with the galleon's passage. This comes on the heels of allegations that the new vessel is unfit. Was the business community in Tobago convinced? We are joined by Mr. Martin George, the Vice President of the Tobago Division of the Chamber of Commerce. Sir, welcome to Morning Edition.
Thank you. Good morning, Hayden, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. And when you say Fantastic Friday, I only think of one thing. But
exactly.
We are a little bit early for that.
No, we're not. We have Borrow Day coming up. So, you may have your own Fantastic Friday. So, was the meeting with the minister fruitful in terms of providing greater clarity as to how the sea bridge will be normalized?
Well, what I can tell you for sure, Hayden, the meeting with the minister was a very frank and open discussion. We were definitely heartened by the approach taken by the minister. It was certainly not a top-down approach. He sat around the table with us, and he and his team, they leveled with us on many of the issues. One of the things that we were happy that he acknowledged that even the galleon's passage is not the final solution. He was very clear on that. He says, look, he recognizes that this is a stopgap measure, but he felt that something had to be done to try to restore the confidence of the sailing public in terms of the inter-island transport. Even the Cabo Star, he mentioned that, and he admitted that that is not the proper solution, So the thing is, that candor, at least as a starting point, I think was definitely a plus in terms of how he approached it. He also pointed out that the Port Authority, he has spoken to them and given them a mandate that they must improve their customer service. So I invite members of the public to look forward to seeing if we observe this improvement in the customer service delivery from the Port Authority, because he told them, and he said to the Port Authority representatives there in the meeting, and they were well represented, from chairman to captain to cook, everybody was there, right? And he told them, he said, listen, the tourist experience must start with you. In other words, from the time someone tries to even go online to purchase a ticket, or even go in the, in your building there to try to buy a ticket, you must start that tourism experience. In other words, he says the vacation must start there. People must be able to relax. It must not be a place of frustration and torture and torment as it currently is. That's the reality. So, he says he really wants to see a culture change there. So we pointed out several basic, simple things that could be done, Hayden. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of being there, but, we said, look, things like having Wi-Fi, for the public. So while you're waiting, at least it can ease your frustration of the long hours you might have to wait, having proper televisions, proper seating accommodation, proper toilet facilities, proper cafeteria or luncheon facilities. So even though you may end up in a delay, like for instance, you've been at airports. I know you are a world traveler, so at many airports, the point is these little things that help to pass the time so it doesn't seem like just torture. You all crammed into one room there with nothing to do, and that's the scenario at the port in Port of Spain and Scarborough. So they need to radically change these things.
Mr. George, these are things that are par for the course. These are standard amenities in the 21st century. We would think that our Port Authority is well aware of their role in developing our tourism sector. So apart from all of the niceties and the formalities of the meeting, did you get concrete information as to when the galleon's passage will be put into service? And of course, all of the so-called adjustments and re-engineering that was supposedly necessary to make the boat suitable for the route, are those issues already resolved?
Well, from what we understood, and I'm subject to correction, but it didn't appear that everything was resolved in terms of the adjustments that needed to be done. However, I think what they're aiming for, from what I gleaned from what the minister said, he said that, look, what they're looking for is the safety and certification, right? To make sure that it is safe for the journey, safe for passengers, safe for the users, safe for the staff, those who have to operate the vessel, yes, and that it has all the necessary certifications to be able to make the journey. And I think the idea is that the modifications will come along the way, but I think they want to start putting it into service. He could not give us a timeline because I think it's the maritime services unit
Yes.
that has to do with the registration and certification. So I think they have to deal with those things. But once those are finished, he is hopeful that it may be weeks and we should see it in actual service. So the thing is, the timeline, he did not give a specific timeline.
Now here's the outcome of all of this. Businesses in Tobago are struggling. The banks are nipping at their heels. The banks are demanding their pound of flesh. The issue here, of course, has been the significant decline in domestic tourism travel to Tobago. You're sitting at the Chamber of Commerce's division in Tobago. What are the business people saying to you? Say, listen, you're our representative. How can we find a way back to normalcy? What is to be the future of retail businesses, hotels, guest houses, people who are just renting for easy travel, like Airbnb kind of business models?
Yes.
What is to be the outcome for these businesses as they await some level of normalcy, not only on the sea bridge, but I dare say on the air bridge?
The air bridge
yes.
also. And the thing is, Hayden, it is unacceptable, wholly unacceptable, that for, as you mentioned, air bridge, for a 20-minute flight, you have persons who sometimes wait 20 hours at the airport trying to get a 20-minute flight. Where in the world could that ever be acceptable? I can tell you, that $50 imposition, we've raised concerns about that. We've objected to that because not only is it unfair, and it actually ends up basically changing your airfare from $300 to $400 for a round trip. Right. Because the point is, they don't allow open tickets anymore, so you can't purchase an open ticket and then, when your schedule allows you to fly, you go up and try and get. No, you have to pay the $50. You have to go and join a line to pay the $50. Sometimes there's one person at the counter. So while you're waiting in line 45 minutes, an hour to pay this $50, flights are going, persons are going on the standby list, you are being left out. So, it makes absolutely no sense. The management of CAL has to get their act together. That $50 fee makes absolutely no sense. It cannot be doing anything for their bottom line in terms of charging it. The cost of recovery of that certainly could not be worth the disruption and trauma that it causes for the traveling public, right? So that has to go.
Carl was insisting that this $50 imposition was in fact meant as a disincentive in order to change behavior where people will stick to their scheduled flight.
Yeah, but the point is then if you are doing that, right, and this was a point that was raised by the Chief Secretary in the meeting because he was present also. He said that, look, if it is that was the intention, then the means by which they approach it is totally wrong.
Okay.
It makes absolutely no sense because
so it hasn't worked.
In other words, if that's the case, what then is the incentive for persons who stick to their flights and go on time? If you understand me. So in other words, that type of approach, you're supposed to use a carrot and a stick. But all we're getting from Cal is the stick. Either way you turn, you're getting stick.
There's no
back, front, side, everywhere. All you're getting is licks from Cal.
Cal owes us some carrots.
This is the point. And the thing is, here's the next thing.
Yes.
And persons have raised this as a legitimate concern. So when Cal's flight does not fly on time, do they then give everybody $50? No, they don't. So it can't be fair. It makes absolutely no sense. You're punishing me one way, and then when you are yourself are late, you're not giving me back the $50. You're not rewarding me. So it's a pointless.
People are probably not aware,
exercise.
But we do have a passenger bill of rights, and we do follow certain conventions and so on. So airlines are obligated to some degree to compensate people for late flights and cancelled flights.
That's the point. And the Warsaw Convention, that's what governs it. So the thing is, you really have to look at how they view the Tobago run. Because if you're talking about bringing in people like Sandals and international brands, you are certainly not going to endear yourself to anyone. If you bring someone from North America, Europe, wherever, and they reach to Piarco, and then you spend more time trying to get the 20-minute flight than you spent coming from Germany or Holland or wherever you originated. How could that ever make sense to anyone?
But I'm trying to understand, CAL has repeated itself over and over with regard to dealing with the peak demand issue on the air bridge. introducing additional flights. And during the crisis on the sea bridge, they were at pains to explain that they had done a significant amount of work to add to the capacity of the air bridge. So then the question I'm asking is, why has that not held out into the July-August
In
vacation?
other words, it can't just be a knee-jerk reaction. In other words, I think Caribbean Airlines needs to understand the role they play in the tourism sector in Trinidad and Tobago. To my mind, they don't appreciate that fact yet. I mean, it sounds amazing. They've been in existence for decades, but it doesn't seem they understand that. Because the tourism experience, the same thing the minister was talking about, is supposed to start there at the airport too, if you understand me, right? But instead, you sometimes have, I mean, the staff at the counter, sometimes they're overwhelmed, they're frustrated because of, you know, the volume of people there, but it's because the management has not put proper systems in place. And that's where the fault lies. And the thing is, as a result, you have crowds of people there waiting, you know, people get angry, they get vexed, they get frustrated because the system makes no sense. The new thing they're doing now, they're stopping ticket sales. So no sales of tickets. So therefore, you have persons who've been waiting, and then they tell you, well, we're not selling tickets. So you're there, you're wondering, well, okay, so what do I do? Do I leave the airport and go where? The boat has sailed or there's no boat going, you know, and you tell me you're not even selling me a ticket, you know, then those with tickets who want to change, to pay the $50 to change, they're not even allowing them. When they stop the sales, even those persons cannot come and pay the $50. So the same $50 imposition that you've made, that now I can't even pay that. That's the absurdity of what is happening. That's the reality on the ground at the airport, particularly during this time. But the point is, it's the norm, and particularly for persons who have to travel regularly between the islands, it's a nightmare.
Well, I'm hoping that we can get a response from Carla in terms of, you know, responding to some of these issues.
I'm hoping they can call in now and discuss it.
Probably, but you know, you know, Mr. George, while we agonize over the state of the air bridge and the sea bridge, Tobagonian business persons, employment in the private sector in Tobago must have been adversely affected throughout this entire ordeal. What are the chances that in a short space of time we can see some kind of rejuvenation of the private sector in Tobago?
All right, okay. So the thing is, there are things that can be done hidden, right? Because the way I always look at things, I always look at big picture. In other words, despite adversity at the moment, you always look to see, well, what are the opportunities? So one of the things that we've been calling for, and I have been advocating every opportunity I get, I've said an immediate and unconditional repeal of the land license regime. That the government can do immediately. That's a start, because I'll tell you why. The direct foreign investment to Tobago from 2007, 2008 fell off totally once that regime was introduced. So in other words, you went from a high to zero. So,
of course, you know, the issue is the question of land ownership.
Well, no, and I'll tell you, the point is, and I said it on this program to Fazil some years ago when that whole idea was being floated, I indicated, I said, what is going to happen is that you are going to move the sale of lands from the foreigners who are coming to invest to the wealthy Trinidadians who will come over and buy the lands, and that's exactly what has happened. So in other words, if you were trying to stop Tobagonians from selling their lands, it has not occurred. In other words, what has happened now is you've had because there's a lot of, you know, currency floating around locally, so therefore people are looking for places to invest, so therefore they go across and to Tobago and they buy. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, if your objective was to stop Tobagonians from selling their lands, you failed miserably. So I think we have to be honest and recognize that that has been an abject failure. As I've said repeatedly, you can have eventually the reintroduction of a properly managed licensing regime, as many other islands do. Cayman Islands, Bermuda, all these places, they do it. And not just that, how they do it, they link it to specific investments. So in other words, if you wish to buy this piece of land, then first of all, you must have a fee whereby, like some of these islands, they charge you like $100,000 US per year, right, to maintain your license. So now that is practical and sensible. So in other words, you have a continuing stream of income from the purchase. Then some of them say, well, okay, look, if it's over 1 acre or if it's over 5 acres, then you must have a local partner who would invest 20%. So therefore, you have whatever development you're looking at putting. If you're looking to put like, you know, a guest house or a small hotel or whatever, you now have that local content in it, building the equities and the knowledge transfer, that kind of thing. So in other words, come on, we're in the year 2018. This is not rocket science, as I've kept saying, Hayden. So in other words, we need to find ways to manage these things. I've said also, the government owes Tobago, and I make no apologies for saying this, the government owes Tobago a tax concession. And I'll tell you why.
On what
Now
basis?
wait, listen to me. Wait, just now be. Hold on. I said Tobago, not Tobagonians. So in other words, anyone shopping, doing business in Tobago ought to have some kind of moratorium, either on the VAT or, you know, your taxes, something of the sort. The government has to do that as a measure of some immediate relief and compensation in terms of the Tobago business people.
You're talking about some kind of fiscal stimulation for the Tobagonian economy.
Right, yes. So in other words, rather than you giving me a handout, right, provide an incentive. So in other words, if Tobago is a tax-free zone in terms of your VAT, then, you know, persons coming to shop in Tobago could at least feel, you know, some motivation to do so, because they say, well, okay, look, at least I am getting it at a better price, that kind of thing. So in other words, you ensure that there's some ability to return to competitiveness.
The administration of this, Mr. George, you can well imagine will be nightmarish for the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, but the point is, Hayden, these things, listen, let me tell you, not because something is difficult means it is impossible. I've learned that since I was a child. Because it's difficult doesn't mean it can't be achieved. And that's how we have to approach it. And that's why we elect persons to be in government, to face these challenges and find solutions. It's not to throw your hands up in the air. I mean, okay, in that case, the crime situation will say we could never solve it because it's difficult.
But are these ideas emanating from the THA? I want to talk about that.
They're not emanating from the THA. We are suggesting them. I personally, every opportunity I get, every talk show I go on, I raise them.
Well,
as to whether it's falling on fertile ground. You know, the Bible says a man can throw his seed, but if it falls on barren ground, then nothing will result.
There's no result. Well, let's hope that the THA is not barren ground. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue this very important discussion with Mr. Martin George. We'll be back.
Final. It's the final extension of Fab India Expo. Definitely closing on Emancipation Day, Wednesday, August 1st. Everything selling at the most reasonable prices. Massive sale now on. Get up to 80% off. Spend $1,000 or more on links or credit card for a chance to spin to win up to $500 instantly. Don't miss out on this opportunity to visit the best of the best. Fab India Expo at the White Tent opposite Medford Gas Station, Chaguanas. No expo until Diwali. Final extension. Definitely closing on Emancipation Day, Wednesday, August 1st.
Every minute of every day, life is remembered in moments. I'm so happy you're here for these times that we share. Oh, how nothing compares to these subway moments. Subway moments.
At Rand Credit Union, get access to internet banking, health insurance, prepaid debit cards, loans for any purpose, and many more benefits. Learn more about what we offer on our website, www.rand.org.tt, Facebook, Rand Credit Union, and our Instagram, Rand Credit Union pages.
There I was, dreaming of my new kitchen. Then one day, I found the perfect one at CW Interiors. They even said, we can build it in just 1 week. I was super excited, so I said, oh my gosh, are you for real? They did it. CW Interiors gave me expert advice and installed my new kitchen to my satisfaction. What more can a girl want? Any of these could be yours, so call them today.
Ladies, Ladies, Angel Hair Boutique have arrived in Trinidad and Tobago at Gulf City Mall and Cannes Plaza, Princestown. Buy 3 bundles of human hair and get your makeup done free. Buy your human hair bundles for prom, wedding, or any special occasion and get a free installation and makeup free by our in-house makeup artist. And of course, our wholesale discounts for hairdressers. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram and win big prizes monthly.
Step up your search with Property Pro, the real estate guide from the Trinidad Express newspapers. Appearing on the first and third Tuesday of every month, this pullout offers a comprehensive, up-to-date listing of commercial and residential real estate properties in Trinidad and Tobago. So whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build, we've got you covered. Don't wait. Step up your search with Property Pro. Free this Tuesday in your Trinidad Express newspapers.
Calypso
Welcome back, folks. It's 26 minutes before 7 o'clock, and we're talking about the sea bridge, the air bridge, the implications for the Tobago economy, the Tobago society as a whole, for Trinidad and Tobago as a nation. And we have here with us Mr. Martin George. In his dispensation this morning, he is the Vice President of the Tobago Chamber of Commerce. Sir, the situation with employment in Tobago, the situation with the performance of the business sector in Tobago. Many of these entities have mortgages, they have borrowed funds from the financial sector, and with the sudden downturn in domestic arrivals, the reduction in incomes for a lot of these entities, the banks are demanding their pound of flesh. What is being done to provide these entities, these affected entities, with some level of breathing room while this sea bridge and air bridge situation is normalized, whatever that is?
All right, okay. So, hey, let's understand something. The present situation for many of the businesses is that their aspiration is to try first to get back to zero. In other words, you're so deep down in the hole that you're just trying to claw your way back up to at least reach zero. So
and
at least
break even.
So you're not even talking profit yet. You want to get just out of the red, you know, and then you could probably start thinking of getting into the black. So that's the reality of many scenarios. But the thing is, we were told by, I think, one of the officials, government or THA officials, that you need to understand that business is a risk, and if you have taken the risk, then you have to understand that it's not always going to be positive and stuff like that. And sure, I have no difficulty with that. No.
That works well in normal times, but these are not normal times.
And that's the point. So in other words, that was a rather shallow, superficial, and simplistic analysis that was applied there, because if the regulatory framework, the parameters in which I am to operate my business are being strangled and constricted by you who have the governing authority, then clearly I'm not on a level playing field. So therefore, and that's the point we keep making. In other words, this is not something that the business persons have control over. We cannot operate a sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago or an air bridge between Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Right? When you look at the parameters in which the THA operates, in terms of you look at the 5th schedule and what it has control over,
yes,
the point is central government still has an overarching responsibility and role there. So the thing is, all the business persons are saying is, hey, listen, put an efficient, effective system of transport, air transport, sea transport between Trinidad and Tobago. Hayden, I have said on this program repeatedly, another simple solution. You try to look at a seaplane service between Port of Spain and Scarborough. And I'll tell you why I suggest that. For business travelers, it is a nightmare to get between Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
In other words, you just have a briefcase and some documents. You're coming down to Trinidad for an interview. You're coming down to go to the hospital, whatever. You don't want to have to fight up, get to Crown Point. You're waiting hours to get a flight. Then you land in Piaco. You're facing the nightmare of that traffic to get into Port of Spain.
The rush hour traffic.
Whereas if you have a seaplane service, first of all, it takes the load off of the Piarco Crown Point run, right? So therefore, the persons who are on business, so in other words, no luggage, don't come with any suitcase or any, the Guyanese bag or anything like that. Right?
Oh gosh, don't say the Guyanese bag.
Sorry, that's what they call them.
But I take your point.
Right, but the thing is, so therefore, if you have that takes a whole load off of it. You have persons who come for, lots of different things. Companies send up persons, for a day for Tobago to do things. So if you have that, and it's so convenient because your worker from Trinidad could take that seaplane service in Port of Spain, go to Tobago, do their business, be back in Port of Spain, and you have an afternoon you could do work. So that is one thing that can be done easily in terms of taking the load off of that air bridge.
From the Chamber's perspective, though, Mr. George, are the financial institutions sympathetic to the plight of their customers in relation to these mortgages, these other loans? Because as we work towards normalizing the link between Tobago and Trinidad, air and sea, the banks, of course, will point out, we have a mortgage agreement. This is your obligation as our customer. But in the light of the circumstances, we would like to either A, temporarily adjust this mortgage agreement, or B, grant you some kind of moratorium outright. Are they being accommodating in that regard?
Well, Hayden, from what the feedback I've been getting, the banks have been so empathetic, it's unbelievable. In other words, they sit with you nicely and they say, oh my, I'm so sorry to hear this.
This is a difficult time for all of us.
Yes. However, please see the officer and make arrangements to pay. So they're so sweet and lovely. It's unbelievable. But at the end of the day, you get that letter in the mail the next week or the next day, saying you are in default, please pay up. Basically, that's what has been happening. So there's no silver lining there in terms of thinking that there's going to be some policy adjustment. That type of thing only happens, I think, when you have some kind of governmental intervention.
Yes.
You remember the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae crisis in the U.S.
The bailout.
It's only the government that came in and salvaged that scenario. So the point is, in that regard, I don't think Tobagonians can look to the banks directly for any salvation because properties are being put up for sale.
Yes.
And as I said, what is happening? And you see, again, the fallacy of the foreign investment scenario is that you have persons with deep pockets. They fly across, they take the 20-minute flight, they go across, and they're happy to bid on the properties that are put up for sale. And you can't blame them, that's business, if you understand me. But the point is, it's not fair to the Tobagonian businessman who is not operating on a level playing field. I'll tell you, Hayden, here's how we have to start looking at this. And we have to move this from being a Tobago issue.
Yes.
This is a national issue.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. If you are living in San Fernando and you are working in Port of Spain, and every morning you are trying to get to Port of Spain and you're driving along the highway and the highway is cut off, closed off, and they said, well, look, you can't go. You have to wait 5 hours until we start back selling passes for you to be able to. How would the average person living in San Fernando feel? There'll be burning tires, there'll be riots, if you understand me. So we have to look at it that way. Just think of the scenario when the hillside collapsed on the Morvan Lady Young.
The Lady Young. Mm-hmm.
Think of the chaos that caused and how people were frustrated, angry, fed up. And that was just an act of nature.
Yes.
So can you imagine a man-made, engineered situation where you may have to come to Trinidad, you have to bring your child to Mount Hope Hospital, and you cannot get on a flight. You're willing to pay whatever price they're calling. Yeah. You cannot get a flight. They're telling you that you have to come back tomorrow. How could you come back tomorrow in such a situation? Think of the movie John Q. That kind of thing could drive a parent to desperation. Yes. So we need to move the conversation from the just being an isolated Tobago issue and understand this is a national issue, because in other words, Tobago's contribution to the national pie is being starved and strangled because it's not been given the opportunity to breathe.
But is it that the central government, in conjunction with the THA, is it that they're unable or unwilling to have this conversation with the commercial banks, with the financial institutions, to gain some level of formal arrangement to assist Tobago business persons?
Well, that's the point. At this point, there isn't any formalized arrangement in that regard.
Right.
There was the talk of the bailout and that type of thing. From what we've understood from the feedback from our members is that the process is they send you through a series of hoops. So you jump in through hoops. You need to file this document. You need to go back, get this down. You need to get this. You need to get, when they look at, no, you did it wrong. You need to start over. And so you put through the mill, and then at the end, when you are supposed to be granted, you meet a stumbling block, you meet a dead end.
Right.
So the thing is, it has not really worked out the way it was supposed to. So therefore, despite the nice promises and the platitudes, the reality, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating.
Will you concede then that maybe a conversation with Mr. Jack of the THA, Mr. Imbert of the Ministry of Finance is necessary at this time to try and find a way to formalize these arrangements, to give Tobagonian business persons some breathing space so that we don't end up with Tobagonian businesses just simply dying?
Well, if that would help, I mean, there's no difficulty in trying to have that conversation again, but the Chamber has had quite a bit of conversations directly, I think, with the Minister of Finance, and there have been promises made. And the thing is, the reality is that despite those things, we've not seen the full effect of, any sort of, as you say, moratorium. And that's what it really needs to be. There needs to be some formalized, structured thing applying across the board for all the banks and financial institutions. In other words, so therefore, it has to, and that's why I tell you, the only way these things are effected is if it's a governmental intervention so that a policy position is taken. Without that, you would have banks individually, they're competing against each other, and they say, well, why must I give it if Hayden is not giving it? Look how Hayden is looking nice. Why must I suffer myself? And,
Always.
And that's exactly what is going to happen.
Mr. George, well, I hope that this kind of formal intervention is something that the Chamber is working assiduously towards, and that Tobagonian businesses will find some breathing room to survive.
Yes, but I mean, just on a last note, Hayden, I would tell you that despite all the drama and trauma and crisis, I've also said it to Tobago business persons, look, we need to take this time as a moment of introspection and reflection. In other words, let's face the reality. We need to improve how we do business.
Fine.
We need to improve. So in other words, things like customer service.
Yes.
That there needs to be a tremendous improvement in the customer service experience that persons get when they come to Tobago. Being a tourist or a visitor is not an opportunity for the local to, rob you or fleece you or trick you, to get money from you. That's not what tourism is about.
Indeed.
I've always said, and I want Tobagonians to begin to understand this, tourism is a means of pleasantly separating a visitor from his money in a way that he's so happy he will come back and do it all over again because of the experience.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Great having you here.
Always a pleasure.
Tobago, I'm keeping a close eye on the situation. Hopefully, in conjunction with Mr. George, we can continue to advocate for some kind of relief happening in that Tobagonian economy. Folks, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have a lot more in store for you. The year 1990 was a special year. We'll be back to tell you more about it.
Calypso